I've got a couple of book updates and then a few extra thoughts. So the first for me, which was cool, is that I got my first paperback versions of The Wideness of the Sea in the mail yesterday. It's always satisfying to get that first physical book in your hands, a tangible representation of all the blood, sweat, and tears you spent countless hours in writing the book. And I'm very happy to have this book. So, The Wideness of the Sea is 173 pages. I think it's not a word wasted, which I always strive to do in a book. I don't want to waste a reader's time. So I want to have a concise, clear argument laid out. And I believe I have achieved that in this book. So a succinct, focused explanation for how to be evangelical and gay affirming, in which I explain something about theological method, about the complexities of understanding what evangelical even means. And I'm going to come back to that in my final thoughts in the video. So that's very cool to see. Also, a bit of good news, the audio version of the book is available only through Amazon.com, unfortunately. And I'm not sure why that is with KDP, but it's only available through Amazon.com, not other Amazon websites. So my apologies for that inconvenience. I would think if you had a VPN, you could still buy it through Amazon.com from another country. But yeah, that's the limitation at this point. But if you are interested in getting an audiobook, then please do so. I'll link you below. All right, a few thoughts I had. First of all, about the initial reception to the book. So there's one five-star review on Amazon.co.uk, which is good to see. It's only been out for a few days. And there's a four-star rating on Goodreads. So no review there yet though. And then I've had some responses from people I know. So one fellow I know who was a former Baptist minister, he reached out to me and he talked about that he was grateful for the book and that a few years ago he did an interview, and in the interview he represented some degree of uncertainty about the issues pertaining to gay marriage, and within a couple hours he got a call from the area minister who had been informed by someone who had heard the interview that he was having thoughts, questions about this topic. And he said, well, that initiated a 4-hour meeting with the area minister, at the end of which I resigned from being a Baptist pastor. And that's an example to me of how evangelicals have often been trained to view this as a definitional issue. That if you deny gay marriage, sorry, if you accept gay marriage, it is equivalent to having denied the resurrection of Jesus. And so I've gotten some responses, a couple responses, I would say, from people that had that sort of icy sense of betrayal. That by saying, arguing that being evangelical is consistent with affirming gay marriage, that was equivalent to saying being evangelical is consistent with denying the resurrection of Jesus. And there was this cold sense of betrayal in their communication to me. So be it, right? I think they have a very distorted understanding of what the gospel is if they think that that is equivalent to denying the resurrection of Jesus. And I also think probably they and many other people have a distorted understanding of how doctrine functions and what orthodoxy is, how it is defined. And I'm going to come back to those 2 points at the end of this video. I just wanted to share one more quick thought. So one friend of mine who's an Anglican reached out and said this. In response to my book, the same-sex relationship marriage issues are still tiptoe discussions among congregants. And they're talking about in their church, their Anglican church, where there has been an open discussion of these issues for years in principle, still you have to tiptoe through these discussions. I remember back in, I think it was 2004, I think it was, so about 21 years ago, Gene Robinson in the Episcopal Church in the United States, so like the American Anglicans, he was the first person to be gay affirming and to become a bishop in the Episcopal Church in the US. And at that formal service where he was recognized, he had to wear a bulletproof vest. And I always thought that that was a pretty disturbing illustration of just how dangerous and polarizing this issue remains for many people. Okay, the last thing I wanted to say was just a couple quick thoughts. And these are some of the major themes in the book. So I'm just going to give you two of them. First of all, that orthodoxy or evangelical orthodoxy or right thinking, right doctrine is not just a timeless deposit of unchanging doctrine. Evangelicals are often trained in the manner of Jude 3 to think of the faith once for all delivered unto the saints, as if there is some timeless deposit of doctrine that was given to the early church, which has never changed and which has been faithfully passed on. In the words of Paul in that rabbinic language from First Corinthians, what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. Or of Galatians 1, 8 and 9, if even an angel from heaven should teach you anything other than what you have received, let that person be accursed. And so then people take those snippets and think, okay, so doctrine just is this unchanging thing. And if the church has taught a particular issue, taught a particular stance on an issue like gay marriage, then this is just the unchanging, timeless reality. But that just ain't true. Doctrine is always changed. Just go back to the early centuries of the church. You see, for centuries, the church slowly hammered out doctrines like incarnation, atonement, resurrection, doctrine of the Trinity, creation, fall. Those were hammered out over centuries. And it's not like the church has ever reached a point where now we don't have to worry about figuring out doctrines anymore. It continues into our own day. And one of the themes in the book, I look over evangelicalism in North America, particularly over the last 30 years, and then more broadly over the last 50 to 60 years. And I give several examples of how evangelical conceptions of orthodoxy have changed in some very significant ways. And it illustrates as false the claim that evangelical orthodoxy, what it is to be an evangelical, is some unchanging reality. Orthodoxy shifts and changes over time. And you have to recognize that and come to terms with that. The second of the themes that I wanted to just mention in this video is that so many people have this reductionistic understanding of theological method, the process by which people come to articulate and affirm particular doctrines. They have a reductionistic understanding of it as simply counting up Bible verses. So you see what the biblical authors said about X, Y, or Z, and you've now settled the issue of what you ought to think about X, Y, or Z. So you line up the so-called clobber passages from the Bible, particularly Leviticus 18 and 20, Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Timothy 1, maybe a reference to Sodom and Gomorrah in there as well. And you've settled what Christians should think about same-sex relationships and gay marriage. But that's not actually how doctrine functions. And I also explain that. I show how doctrine actually functions and emerges through a complex interplay of reading of scripture with other sources. So speaking in terms of the Wesleyan quadrilateral, your interaction with tradition, reason, and experience. And once you begin to recognize these factors and all of these four factors and how they work together with one another, you begin to see why orthodoxy is a shifting social reality over time. And that opens up the space to have an honest conversation about what it means to be evangelical and gay affirming. That's some quick thoughts about the book. Again, I'm going to link the audiobook for people who use Amazon.com below if you're interested in getting a copy of that one as well.